So hello again, everybody. So now we have a panel session of experts in some of the various areas that we've been talking about this morning, and also no doubt people who are learning and developing, like all the rest of us as well, with what are very new standards and legislation. So we're asking the question, what competencies will accountants need to effectively perform sustainability reporting and assurance? And we've structured this into 4 parts. So I'm going to ask the panellists for some opening remarks, to put in context where they're at, what their role is, and how they come to this topic. And then we'll have some discussion, a main discussion on some key themes. Then we're going to open the floor to the audience, and then I will ask for key takeaways for our audience today from our panellists. So it's my pleasure to introduce them. So we have Dorarca Dennis from EY, and Dorarca is a climate change and sustainability partner. We have Judith Wiley, Dr. Judith Wiley, who is a senior lecturer in Ulster University. Kevin has just spoken, CEO of IAASA and my boss, if I'm very nice to him. And then we have Alarina Keneally, who's from Kerry Group and is Group Sustainability, responsible for Group Sustainability Reporting there. And we have Glenn Gillard from Deloitte, who is a partner in Sustainability Services there. So thank you very much for being with us. We're delighted that you can be here to give us your insights and expertise. So I suppose you're the lucky person beside me, Dorarca, so I might ask you to make some opening remarks, please.
Thanks, Eileen. Lovely to be here this morning, and thanks for the invitation. So I'm Dorarca Dennis, and I lead our sustainability service practice in EY Ireland. I suppose my background, I'm actually a chartered accountant, funnily enough. And a couple of years ago, somebody said, "Why are you involved in this? You're an accountant." So Kevin, we need to pick up on that story. But I suppose, I work with clients in sustainability advisory, and CSRD has become the area of kind of challenge and interest for many. But I suppose in a broader spectrum, also supporting clients with strategy and implementation. And I suppose the area of sustainability and reporting has come to the fore. And I think, right now, a lot of the skills that we have as chartered accountants actually are very, very relevant. But I think we have to be really conscious, and I am very conscious. I lead a team of people, and many people, which we'll talk about later on, who are geologists, scientists, environmental scientists, engineers, with the expertise that we all need. So I think everybody in this room also needs to be cognizant of that change and that momentum that I think we all have to accept and embrace. And I suppose the last thing I'll say is I am a huge fan of integrated reporting, so this is my heaven.
Brilliant. Thank you. Judith.
Thanks, Eileen. So I'm Judith Wiley. I'm a senior lecturer at Ulster University. I'm also a chartered accountant. So in my previous life, pre-academia, I worked as a forensic accountant, so doing a lot of fraud investigation work, and then from my way into university life. But I still work in the forensic space in terms of my teaching, and interestingly, it's kind of come full circle in that a lot of the work that the forensic team would be doing now is around environmental misrepresentation or greenwashing, or whatever way you want to call it. So it's interesting to see that career kind of come full circle and what the outputs are there. But coming into my teaching, I started into a PhD many moons ago on CSR reporting. CSR being the key term there back in the day when I was starting out. But in Irish listed companies, so as we've got representatives here today, and was told at the time, a PhD in hugging dolphins, and kind of thought, hadn't really thought of it like that. Yeah, tree hugger, whatever you want to call it, and I think if that person was in the room today, they'd very much see that, with the regulation and with all of the guidance and the materiality and the assurance piece around all of what I was looking at the time, when it was largely voluntary, it's a very, very much a changed landscape, and it's very much positive to see this and to see these conversations happening and to see this network happening as well. So also within my role then, I work within our Ulster University Business School Sustainability Working Group, which works across faculties to get that kind of collaborative approach, breaking down those silos and getting different people's perspectives on research, enhancing the student experience, and also engaging with industry and finding out what industry's needs are. And then I'm also also on Chartered Accountants Ireland Working Group or Experts Group for Sustainability. So I'm kind of coming, I realise there's a panel later on sort of really focused on kind of embedding within the curriculum stuff. So maybe, you know, I'll draw on some of my work working with SMEs, working with Chartered Accountants Ireland on the Sustainability Working Group there on some of the competency gaps, I suppose, that are out there in business in Ireland at the minute.
Many thanks, Judith and Kevin.
Yeah, I won't take up any time. You all know what I do, and our job is basically to make sure that everybody here does the job they're supposed to do.
Thank you. Ellerina.
Hi everyone, I'm Ellerina Keneally, and as Eileen mentioned, I'm the Group Head of Sustainability Reporting for Kerry Group. This role that I'm doing is a new role in the last couple of years. And I suppose it was brought about because of maybe two key factors. One, I suppose that sustainability is, you know, at the heart of everything that we do in Kerry Group. It's part of our purpose, it's part of our vision, it's part of our business strategy. You know, and maybe just to remind everyone, like Kerry Group, we're a large global organisation, 8 billion of revenue last year. We operate in 137 manufacturing locations around the world, and we have a team of about 22,000 people. Sustainable nutrition is what we're about, and for us, sustainable nutrition is nutrition that encompasses, we'd say, lower fat, lower salt, lower sugar, that maintains the taste so that we still want to eat the products that our customers are making, but doing that in a way that does not have a negative impact on the environment, but also takes account as well of the social impact of the products that we're making. And that's a journey that we're on. We launched our Beyond the Horizon sustainability strategy back in 2020 and set our targets, which, you know, are quite ambitious like most other organisations. And we've been reporting on sustainability as required for a long number of years, over 10 years. In about 2021, we started doing our separate sustainability report, which we use the GRI framework. We're UK premium listed, so we had to comply with TCFD. So we had to do reporting on climate risks. And we've also been reporting under EU taxonomy. And now we're privileged enough to be part of Wave 1 to incorporate CSRD. So clearly, you know, a role as the head of sustainability reporting was a necessary role, I suppose, in our organisation to cope with not just the regulatory requirement and the evolving nature of the reporting, but also the performance measurement to try and drive performance management and achieve the targets. A bit like that was said earlier, I'm a chartered accountant. Before I moved into this role, I had 30 years experience in finance. I was CFO of a North America region for a while. I was the group financial controller. So I was responsible for the financial statements that are included in the annual report. So clearly, you know, this discussion today is about the journey as to where the finance professionals need to go, the education. I've had to do a lot of that myself, and also my team. I have a small team that, for most of them, their background is in financial reporting as well. And how do they come up to speed in terms of sustainability reporting? So happy to be part of this discussion.
Brilliant, and hold that thought because we have lots of questions on that shortly. And Glenn, please.
Yeah, morning everyone. Glenn Gellard from Deloitte, and as Eileen was saying, I lead up our sustainability practice. So a bit like Dorarca, it's not just sustainability reporting professionals, but professionals working across all things sustainability and all the way through, I suppose, where we can provide sustainability related services. By background, I'm a chartered accountant and an auditor, so I'm more laterally moved over into sustainability, but also I've been 8 years on the Council of CAI and for 4 years on chairing the education board with Ian and Colette, and so we've been thinking a lot about sustainability in education, and obviously fairly proud that we got our certifications out around sustainability pretty early and before some of these things came into legislation. But I do think there's a huge challenge and opportunity to rethink how we're training people right the way through from an education point of view. I also have a role within our wider sort of European firm in our sustainability executive around learning and knowledge share, and we're looking at the learning pathways for all our professionals. And that's quite interesting because we're talking about here a bit about the learning pathways for assurance and reporting sustainability people, but actually there's a big challenge for us around the learning pathways for those sustainability people that are coming in that really don't feel at home in that sort of mainstream sort of business environment. How do we create the right path for a geologist, a climate scientist to really feel that they're benefiting from that structure? So quite a lot of thinking going into how we actually develop our talent to make them feel like they should be part of mainstream business and not where they've traditionally been. We're hiring a lot of people who've sat in NGOs, sat on the side of things, sat in sort of sustainability teams that are quite siloed from the wider organisation.
Okay. Thank you.
And career progression is going to be really important.
Career progression
in terms of
important.
can you sign in the long term.
Brilliant, thank you. And we'll definitely come back to that. I mean, that is a really interesting point about bringing those people who are not traditionally in that business environment in. So maybe what we'll do is we'll just deal with sort of what I'll call our first theme, which is really about the current situation, the current challenges. And Ellerine, if I can start with you then, because you mentioned the ubiquitous journey, all right? So Care Group's on that journey of sustainability reporting. You mentioned you started with GRI, I think, in 2021, but maybe you just give us a sense of what that journey has been like, and in particular the challenges, I suppose, for companies, or at least the challenges that you've encountered that are probably common to companies. You might just tell us about that journey.
I will. So first of all, I think it was mentioned earlier about sustainability and just how broad it is. And I think that organisations have to realise that it encompasses every function within your organisation. And that in itself is a challenge because you're trying to bring functions that have a day job that they feel is guided and directed in one direction, and now you're telling them that you need to kind of partner with them in order to kind of bring the reporting and what we need to report on from a sustainability perspective. So whether that's working with, the same as what you were both saying earlier around working with the engineering function around CO2 emissions, working with responsible sourcing or procurement functions around how we're engaging with suppliers and how we're getting accreditation on raw materials that we're buying, the HR function, and what we're doing in relation to diversity, inclusion and belonging. So it is just really, really broad. So that's the first challenge, is bringing very cross-functional people together to try and deliver on an output. I suppose the journey of GRI has helped towards the journey of CSRD. Definitely, CSRD is far deeper and broader than we'd say what we would have reported under GRI. But at least we'd started those conversations, and we were used to creating a cadence on that reporting. CSRD, I suppose, is a different journey. As I say, there is plenty of challenges that we've been working through. The first key step for every organisation is to develop their double materiality assessment, and that's even challenging because it's new. It's looking at the impact your organisation is having on the environment and on society, but also then what it can have on your organisation, including the financial impact it could potentially have in the future. Trying to do that assessment, you have to try and ensure that you have the right people in the room having that discussion. We took an opportunity to engage external stakeholders as well to try and make sure that we captured and had a complete review of all the topics that were material. It's new, so we weren't going to assume that we knew it all, so we engaged a third-party expertise in order to help us to and guide us on that path in terms of facilitating it, as well as leveraging their knowledge as well. But I suppose the key thing was we were all learning together because we're first, which is one of the challenges. You've no oh, let's go and see how someone else did it. Is there precedent? I was smiling when I saw one of the answers there was, could we have case studies? Because, you'd like to see how the application was intended to look. So that's a key journey, because once you have your double materiality assessment, at least then you know what you're going to be reporting on, and then you can start engaging on all the different aspects of that. I think it's already been mentioned as well about the fact that you have to look at your value chain. It's outside the boundary of your own organisation, whereas at least if you've everyone in the room, you can kind of get there. When you're trying to engage with organisations outside your own operational boundary and get information, that's quite difficult. So we all know that scope 3, most organisations are dependent on secondary data rather than primary data. Kerry Group, we can get primary data because we've a really good line with our farmers, but they're only one cohort of suppliers. We have thousands of other suppliers that we're struggling to get that level of information, so you're relying on secondary data. And I suppose another key challenge on this is that, you're working with all these different functions, and they have been gathering some of this information and making decisions on some of the information that they had. But the data still isn't mature, and the data wasn't designed and wasn't consolidated, using an accounting term, in a form that had all the controls or the process rigor that's required that we would all use in a financial reporting process and controls framework. So there is a little bit of trying to manually impose all of those kind of controls in on top of those data. So even organisations that think they have data, trying to have it to the right level of robustness and completeness is a challenge as well. So those are some of the areas that we've had to go through. There's more, but I'll pause there.
Well, I might ask then, Glenn, if that the challenges and experience that Durarca is telling us about Kerry Group, if you're seeing that a trend, is that a trend with other clients, or are there any other challenges?
No, that's definitely, it's the same trend for everyone in terms of trying to build that internal capability, but also that sort of newness of the subject matter and how do you actually use that. Like, I think one of the things interesting as part of this, and I think this is the wider discussion piece, is as Ian was saying, right, we're trying to get this regulation to help us change behaviours. So it's not about reporting, it's about changing behaviours through reporting. And that's probably the interesting thing that we're seeing is there's a lot of focus on compliance at the moment. How do I get ready to report? But what we really are trying, and we're seeing that with the first wave companies, it's now moving into, well, how is this impacting on my business decisions? So exactly that point of, well, if I have to do EU taxonomy, I'm going to make sure that when I'm doing my capital expenditure decision making, that I'm factoring in my green considerations into capital expenditure. So that's actually changing a behaviour. You're now taking that extra sort of dimension, saying, am I putting that in there? I think we're starting to see that, and definitely, the earlier companies are looking at things like transition plans, scenario analysis, where they are actually now building that into their decision making. But I think that's really difficult when you go, well, what's the quality of the information? Like, can I really make a good decision around information that I'm not really that sure is that accurate or that complete? So that link between the two of how good the quality of data is that we're using to make decisions are, and how that influences. So there's a lot of, I suppose, lack of confidence at board level to make sort of firm decisions about the future on data that they're not that comfortable with. But I think it's a real sort of challenge. But it is important that we remember that reporting is not the end game, that the change piece is the end game, and that we are a bit caught up in the reporting piece at the moment, but we need to move quickly onto the, well, how does this make things change?
And CS3D will punish you for not doing so, ultimately. Well, obviously scope's a little bit different, and just on that then, those demands and the challenges their clients are experiencing, how are you seeing that reflected then in the demands for services from the audit firms?
Like, it's interesting, we were talking about sort of like what are the people that we need to actually, support organisations, and there's a piece around the assurance, to be ready for assurance. Like, the way we're looking at it within our firm is, there's a view that every auditor needs to be a sustainability auditor. That's our long-term view. Every auditor needs to be conversant in sustainability. And actually, every audit team will actually deliver part of the sustainability assurance as part of their day job. So we are saying that is going to be an inherent characteristic of an auditor, is that they will have sustainability reporting knowledge. We're also at the same time saying, this is sort of the T. We need people that go a bit deeper. And so we are looking at teams where it's sustainability assurance professionals. So they're the people that really know the standards well, really know that sort of methodology around how we make those decisions, like materiality. How do we apply some of those things and bring them in? So that's quite a big piece. So where do you get those people from? You're either taking them from your audit teams and reskilling them, or you're trying to take them from where they've experienced either in finance or sustainability and working with them. And that's a real issue for accreditation that we'll come back to as part of that. And that's where we're taking people from a mix of backgrounds. And then the third cohort of people that we have are the sustainability professionals. So the people that have deeper knowledge of, say, for example, GHG carbon accounting or human rights as part of that. So those three sort of cohorts of people, and actually in helping an entity get ready for CSRD, we're using all of those people. So we're bringing people in where we're going like, okay, some of our sort of traditional audit type people are coming in to help people look at their controls and processes and be able to document what they're doing. We have those sort of deep technical people that are helping you go like, okay, paragraph 48D says X. But then we're also bringing in the environmental scientists to help do the climate scenario analysis. So it is using those skill sets, and I think that's really, really important in terms of what's there. And when we look at, education here, I thought it was really interesting what Ian was saying around, they've changed, the to bring sustainability into every part of the curriculum. Like, I think there's also a question around how we're bringing some of that sort of reporting piece into the other disciplines, so into not just in our business faculties, but into our other faculties. So in our engineering disciplines, so we're not just giving them their module on accounting or business and costing, that there's something around sustainability reporting in there as well. How do we get that piece in there as well to bring the two together? Because we need to build that skill set that goes across the piece, that from the deep specialists, they need to understand reporting as well, or the impacts of reporting, and our sort of more general accountants and auditors need to understand sustainability reporting enough to be able to access those specialists.
Okay, thank you. And Dorka, I might ask you if what Dan has said there resonates in terms of your experience too, and also maybe the what does this mean for talent in the profession, or the shift in trends in talent?
That absolutely resonates in terms of practice and practice challenges, and that different cohorts of people that are involved. I think, when I think about kind of the professional services firms, like, I'd be honest, I have a degree in psychology, okay? Who would have guessed? And when I trained as a chartered accountant, I was called non-relevant. Yeah, if anyone says that to me again, they'll be in trouble. But that's how I was described, as we have a number of non-relevants. Now those non-relevants are actually the secret sauce for sustainability assurance, because guess what? They're the people that will come in with that little bit of that nugget, that information. So there's a real, that'll tell you how old I am. I trained a long time ago. But it's over 30 years ago since I trained, and everyone was BCom, MAC, all amazing, fabulous. I walked in the door and they went, "You have a degree in what?" And industrial relations as well. What are you at? So I postgrad industrial relations and human resource management, just in case. I want to be a mediator when I grow up. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there. But that's kind of the reality. So that kind of triage of people who are pure accountants, who really understand the debits and the credits, they're still relevant. They're absolutely relevant, and the skills and the kind of the analysis. We really need people like that who'll bring that kind of perspective to sustainability assurance. We also really need people who are passionate, and I get them in kind of throes of people who really want to get involved in this, because if you think about traditional accountants, they came in, and some of us I was very passionate about capital markets and doing it right and making sure you're representing things correctly. And I always used to say to people, I'd love to live in the front half of the annual report, because lovely things happen there. But the integrated reporting I am passionate about, because it tells the two sides of the equation, and it really gives a sense of impact. So you still need that kind of community of people who will bring that passion and vigour to what we're doing. Equally, when I think about from a firm perspective, one of our biggest challenges is you look at professional service firms and it needs to be made more attractive. Like, you know, I have a couple of kids, 3 kids, and none of them want to be an accountant. None of them want to be in a professional service firm. Might want to be a lawyer because apparently they make a lot of money. But genuinely, there's a challenge in terms of the faculties here today. Like, how do you get people in the door to want to be kind of in this space? And I think that's a really important question to ask ourselves. Because when I look at it, it's maybe changing the narrative and telling the story and explaining how that works from a much earlier age. Dare I say it now, there's probably no one here in kind of secondary education. But like I look at the accounting that my kids do and I kind of go, good Lord, that's nothing to do with reality. So there's a little bit of, like everybody in this room is passionate about changing the kind of the third level, but actually if we went to the second level, we might get more in the third level. So for me, there's a piece about where do we start and what does that look like? I absolutely agree with Glenn. We need to actually look at cross-pollination of the different departments within the universities, because really, I think the world of being a singular expert in something is kind of gone. What I would see with clients and in the kind of the environment that I work in, I rarely go into a meeting that there's somebody from a singular department. I thought it was interesting, the reference to finance running the kind of CSRD. Frankly, that's evolved in the last number of years. I've been in sustainability reporting for about 10 years, a bit more, where people actually were willing to be interested in it longer for the uninterested period. And initially, it was never an accountant. It was like, what are you doing in the room? You're not relevant because you know nothing about sustainability. That is changing. But I am aware of some organisations that are very, very big, and their legal counsel runs CSRD. Yeah. Interesting perspective. Yeah, the legal counsel gets to sign everything out. Now, legal counsel should be involved in some of the aspects because of the risk associated, but it's quite... So who runs it isn't absolutely clear, but there is a movement towards finance having that role because of, I suppose, the DNA of an accountant. And I think that's probably not wrong. And I think we can lean on stuff. But I think if I was to sit back at a university level, I'd be saying, how do we supply the right people? Well, how do we make it clear to people that this isn't just... Well, I think actually that it's very interesting, that it changes, it fluxes. You have to attract people who are willing to do things that are slightly unknown. I think everybody sitting around this table have spent the last 3 years every week waking up and going, oh my God, what have they changed this week? Oh, here we go. Yeah, the standard's coming. No, it's not. Yes, it is. I'm really excited about the FAQs. I don't think Orla might have left. Do you know what I mean? There's always something new coming out. That's the kind of person we need to attract too. So it's about making it really clear. So when I look at our business, we need to bring people in who are curious, who want to learn, who, see an evolution of their role and see progression. As being a kind of a fundamental part of it. And if you can get that messaging right, and for us our challenge is, how do we do that within a practice? I'm very fortunate to be part of a large professional service firm. I do appreciate for the smaller firms, it's much more difficult. And that is just the reality. And I think it is incumbent on all of us to see how we support that level of professional firms as well, because we need every one of them to be functioning and working, not just the big four. Mm-hmm. So I'll probably be shot for saying that now, but that is the truth. So I think it's important. I think we've a lot of opportunity. I think it's a really exciting time, actually, frankly. I'm not sure I want to go back to university, but I do think it's an exciting time for that generation, because I think that it's really clear that you can create a very exciting future that starts maybe in a place of comfort if you happen to love the debits and credits, or if you love your audit. You can then evolve and grow as a professional. And I think that message needs to be brought home as well to the students. It's not just you go into a role, but you can actually do a lot. And look at Alarina, they're like, would you think you'd be doing what you're doing now? No. And nor did I, by the way. No. So I think that has to be shared and light shone upon those roles and that opportunity, because when people see opportunity, they get engaged. And then we'll have a future.
It's fair to say, though, that and particularly for current accountants, one of the big barriers at the moment is fear and the breadth and complexity. And I think particularly CSRD, the breadth of that dumping in. So because people didn't really embrace this, even though there were lots of initiatives and GRI and all of that, most people weren't embracing it as accountants. So they're hit by this wall. And there's a big fear, and people really are sort of going, I don't want to go near that. And that does create for current accountants, like how do we bring them in, and that sort of accessibility to that. I do think, I know for CAI, it's a big piece around saying, well, how do you create enough different types of programs that demystify and encourage people to come in, because it's easy to sort of say,
Sure.
well, I'll let someone else deal with that. But I would say, like, dealing
But
with
it's
our
a bit
own
like-
other partners.
But I remind you, it's a bit like IFRS. Does anyone remember IFRS coming in?
Yeah.
Okay, no one old enough in the room.
Yeah.
That was scary. And I know people who retired because they were scared of fair value accounting. Anyway, I've taken over.
No, that's really brilliant, really insightful contributions. Thank you. And maybe you mentioned SMEs, so I think maybe if we talk about actual, new competencies now and so on. So Judith, I know your particular expertise in researching SMEs in this area. So maybe you might just talk a little bit about competencies, relevant to SMEs and the particular challenges or indeed opportunities that might be there in terms of competency development for them.
Yeah, because I think we've kind of naturally, as we do, you go to the big, big scale and CSRD and it's big companies, and but this is having a huge impact. We are an SME-based economy, the lifeblood of the economy, and there's SMEs out there really struggling to know where do we fit within all of this. You think about the literacy, so most people in this room are maybe accountants, as we've kind of learned from the panel, or working in academia. We've got a good kind of handle on a lot of these key terms, but for a lot of SME businesses that are struggling maybe with just making ends meet week to week, month to month, this is another layer, another complexity. But the phone calls are being made. What are you doing on sustainability? The questionnaires are coming through the doors. The tender documents are coming in and looking very different in terms of how to approach those. So there is an ecosystem really needs to be put in place to kind of support the next tier down as well in terms of SMEs, both from an academic perspective in universities. So we do a lot of work in our SME economy in Ulster with Ulster University. We have a centre for sustainable family business, even as an entity in themselves. We've got some brilliant Irish Indigenous family businesses where you might even have a generational kind of tension there around sustainability issues. So, for Gen Z, Gen Alpha, who make up a lot of our university undergrad programs or coming through on their leaving certs, they get the climate crisis. There's no explaining to do, but there may be still with the SME, leadership, there might be still a case to be made for why do we need to change? Why do we need to fill out these forms? What needs to happen? How do we integrate this, and why are we having to integrate this? So there's a piece there, and by building up networks through centres, through clusters, through events like this today, it's just showing that there is a support network there, and particularly through organisations like IAAFA, like IAASA, and Chartered Accountants Ireland that I would do some work with as well. And it's, the Chartered Accountants Ireland work is really two-tier in that there's resources there for small and medium-sized practices, and then in turn those practices which are upskilling, reskilling themselves to be able to advise, they're the trusted advisor for a plethora of farmers that are feeding into your Kerry Group report, retailers, you name it, across the SME sector, all very different, all very niche, all needing different types of support, but it's about making it accessible, making that carbon literacy language accessible to them as well, and providing resources and tools and frameworks so that they can help tell their story, so that they can maintain those contracts, so they can win that new work, and that they can create the behavioural change as well within their organisations, which is probably the most important piece also.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe then we'll go more global, or at least EU, Kevin. And obviously you're involved, at CAOB level, so at EU level as well as internationally. But if we focus on EU in the context of CSRD, the type of skills and competencies needed at EU level, at EC level, at other EU competent authorities, what type of discussions are other EU competent authorities having about this sustainability skills and competencies challenge?
Well, I think back to when they were developing, when EFRAG were asked to develop ESRS, they had no idea where to go. I mean, so their first attempt at putting people together were an awful lot of NGOs, and I think Glenn's point about training people about communication was absolutely appropriate there, because some of us remember the first draft of ESRS, yes. And it was. If you think it's challenging now, you're lucky we're not working with draft one, because you could see it was NGO plus. It was wonderfully aspirational, but you would have had like about 40 pages of financial reporting and 800 pages of all of this stuff at the front. So there is that ongoing challenge of all of these different skill sets, but finding the bits where they all can communicate with each other. I was at a launch recently, Accounting Technicians Ireland, just as a different perspective, had a launch recently of a new sort of qualification called an accounting technologist. And again, they're trying to merge different sorts of skill sets there. So you have some of the core accounting skill sets, but then you also have deep dive into IT and deep dive into CSRD, so you can communicate more effectively with people, again, for whom, to use this phrase, isn't their first language. And the EU aspire now to continue to lead and innovate in this space. I've said in my speech, I think there's a huge opportunity for Irish people here. If you look at people who are in education right now, Europe is a place where there will be a huge demand for the skill sets to be able to continue to develop these. I mean, at a wider level, by the way, there was a huge group of, some of the people will know, there was a huge group of Irish people who came into the European sort of Commission and Parliament when we first joined the EU, and they're sort of retiring out now. There's a demand, a soft demand from Europe to say, we want more Irish people to come in, because you're all going to be crowded out by other countries are bringing newer people in. I mean, so I've worked with some of these people. I mean, it's such an exciting place to go, because you are shaping stuff that's affecting 600 million people, and it's not without its challenges. But all of the sort of, there's a completely different skill set that goes with that as well. So, you're going to have to know accounting. I mean, it was such a frustration to see people who knew bits about bits of things, but didn't sort of be able to knit it all together. One of the things that we're seeing now, sorry, I'm having a lot of thoughts at the same time because it's such an interesting question. Now, when everybody's dealing with this stuff, this is the first time that people at European level who develop these policies know what impact they're going to have. Yeah. Somebody, I think, Dorothy, you said, I'd love to know what they meant by when they were, I don't think they knew what they meant.
They didn't.
When they were designing these things. They definitely didn't know what impacts they were going to have. So there's an awful lot of guidance being developed at European level and interpretation, and now we're running into legal problems because they're in law, not in standards. But if we had people at that level in Europe with the sort of competencies we've been talking about here, who can talk the different languages, who are aware of the challenges of doing corporate reporting, of doing audit, of getting information that's unstructured from unusual areas or areas who aren't used to this, and translating that into data that's manageable, because this should be about strategy. Glenn has made the point. This is not about reporting. God help us, if this is about reporting, we've utterly failed. This should be about, strategic decisions that business make using better data. Yeah. That's where we come in, our accountants come in, providing trustworthy data. So all the way down, from the people who develop policy, to the people who turn it into legislation, to the people who are developing standards, to the people here in countries who are doing education, or auditing, or corporate reporting. There's a huge amount of changed competencies for all those, but a massive opportunity for the next generation of students coming through to fill those gaps.
Okay, thank you very much.
One thing we just as well that isn't covered, that we haven't touched, that we should really remember, is the data in terms of solutions to support people in kind of reporting is only catching up, okay? So there's a big gap there, I think, for people, and it's, again, at the university level, there may be an expectation for the students that everything's there, and, sure, look, I go onto the internet for everything. Actually, the kind of technology solutions aren't there. They are catching up, and that's a frustration for many, because you can see the technical answers, you can read the standards, but you want a system that will consume it, automate it, and produce information in a way that we will be used to for financial reporting. It's coming. There are some really, really good systems at great expense, but they won't sort out your SME. But there are better systems or more affordable systems coming through. But that's a real challenge that I think we need to acknowledge as well.
Okay, thank you. And maybe might get into the nitty-gritty, right, Lorena? What skills, right, in terms of you did the transition, so, 20 years or so in financial reporting, and then the move over to sustainability reporting. Could you talk a bit about the I suppose, the balance between traditional accounting skills and then the new skills that you would have noted, please?
So I think, that I think links into around the operating models in companies as to who should own this, and why does finance end up owning it. So there's a real sense of credibility around that, if you're doing performance measurement around this, and back to Glenn's point about this is about trying to hit a target, drive your performance so that you're having the right impact. It's about impact that you're going to have on the environment or on society. But so there's just an acceptance of the credibility around if it's come out of the finance function, then that there has been this level of process or control around the information. So therefore, they kind of get involved. So, bringing those skills of controls and processes, is clear, being able to read the ESRSs and the technical reporting. If you've come from a financial reporting background and have been involved in the transition to IFRS or new IFRSs, clearly you're able to do that. So you bring a lot of those skills to it. To the sustainability reporting. I suppose, being able to communicate performance or communicate about what do those numbers mean. Now, what do the sustainability reporting numbers mean, and how do they correlate to what information people already know? Because what you have to remember in your organisation is that everyone's learning. So it's not as if you tell someone revenue is X, they'll automatically know the correlations or what the consequence of that means in terms of profit or cash or something, Whereas if you say, our carbon reduction percentage is Y, they'll go, okay, so tell me, is that good or bad, or how did we get there? So you have to bring everyone. So I think, from a finance perspective, we've always had, those skills into being able to articulate it. I think, though, as you transition, and as I transitioned, there were a couple of key steps that I would take, and I was smiling, Ian, when you mentioned about, get into the pathology lab. I think you have to understand what does sustainability mean, and what are the activities, and what does it mean for your organisation, or what does it mean generally? So I would have done a more general, what does sustainability mean kind of course to understand circular economy. You think you know it, but actually, do you know it all? Decarbonisation. Yeah, it's not just about moving to EVs, responsible sourcing, and why is it so difficult to get accreditation? So learning about what sustainability, not being an expert, but absolutely understanding so you can have the right conversations with the different people that are SMEs. I think, as we talk about education going forward, we can't underestimate the complexity of the language around sustainability reporting. I mean, they talk about the alphabet soup. It is the amount of times, again, that I would say that I'm presenting on sustainability and they're going, so which one's that again? I think of carbon credit, a carbon tax, carbon offsets, carbon insets. It is complicated. So trying to learn that and being able to explain that in a simple way. And I think the critical thinking, because a lot of this is new. So problem solving, critical thinking, again, finance professionals would have it, but you now need it kind of super skills in this, because you're designing new processes, you're designing new controls, you're trying to create mechanisms and tools to enable people to understand what sustainability reporting is telling you and how that is impacting on your business. Okay. And, as we go forward, you talked about, it was mentioned earlier about a carbon footprint tool. In Kerry, we have a Kerry Nutri Guide to try and help our customers understand the nutritional profile of our products, but also we have a food waste estimator. So if you're using certain raw materials for our customers, if you're using those, you're potentially can drive food waste. So how do you, if you use these raw materials, you actually reduce that down. So your carbon footprint. So how do all these tools enable better decisions so that actually will bring opportunity? So we talk a lot about the challenges, but ultimately it has to drive opportunity for customers, for our customers, but for companies and for SMEs. And that generational thing, this can bring an opportunity, because if we can show that we're operating on a lower carbon basis, someone will do business with us over someone else. So it's trying to bring that into it, So those are the skills. It's the issuing of data into information that will impact on the decision making.
I think one of the things within that as well, in terms of just a skill set and a sort of a change in sort of emphasis from an accountant point of view, is a greater emphasis on the forward looking and a greater emphasis on a longer time horizon. And so if you look at it, the traditional accountant is always very comfortable with looking backwards. So that's what we do. We look backwards and we report on something. Now, in our day-to-day lives, and accountants spend a lot of time looking forward as well. Lots of FP&A, lots of looking forward, but we tend to look in quite short cycles, and it's a change in mindset to sort of look at those cycles longer and to develop those skills around, well, actually, what am I trying to think about in the context of sustainability? And so I gave the example of CapEx and EU taxonomy, but it's a good example where you say, well, I'm investing in a machine, but I also have to think about its end of life, where it's going to go, the circular economy impact of that. How do I put that into a financial plan and articulate that back to someone who's just going, well, this is the machine that's available that I want to buy, that's going to enhance production.
Yes.
Another one I'm going to add, I know you're dying to get on to the next question, but I would say climate scenario analysis is one that's kind of hugely misunderstood. I know we had the situation in Valencia in the last couple of days, but actually, I work with clients in climate scenario analysis, and how you think about kind of the duration and time frame of your business is completely different. The time horizons are different, and how you might interpret climate change. And like a simple example, working in the kind of hospitality industry, hotels, apart hotels, when you work in doing a climate scenario analysis, you're thinking about, well, where are you located? Funnily enough, most hotels are located near rivers or nice places that have sea in front of them. Why is it there? Because that's actually where ports were established, and that's where cities were established. So when you start getting into those conversations, again, like the next generation of kind of assurance providers are going to have to think about kind of that whole kind of wider aspect of business of why was established, where is established, what could impact it. Will this be a stranded asset? Do I have a lease arrangement, or actually do I own the asset? If it's leased, do I have cover from an insurance perspective if an event were to occur? I mean, all these really, benign questions, but actually they're really important in the context of actually how much at risk is my business? Is that built into my strategy? Do I have a switch that I can turn? Do I not have a switch? So what's my exposure? So I think, and that's from climate scenario analysis. That's not from looking at a balance sheet. So that's kind of a switch and a change for everybody, I think, coming at us that's really important. It's really interesting as well. And by the way, we're hugely exposed to wind in Ireland.
The example Aline was given around sort of building that into the case studies that we teach people. Rather than a case study that says, do your CAPM model on whatever, or do this, that it's building in those other things as well, can really change that. So it's the financial, it's the ESG considerations, but you can do that in an integrated piece. And I know one of the challenges we have at the moment is just from a pure delivery of services across our firm is still silo thinking. Like if we go to our corporate finance team, it's hard to get them to think sustainability when they look at things. Even our M&A and due diligence teams, sustainability hasn't quite made it there. The accountants in those teams aren't pushing hard enough to say, bring sustainability into the room.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'm getting my absolute warning that I need to finish here. I'm sorry, Michael. We didn't even get to, we were going to talk about technology and the absolute impact there, global challenges. We talked a lot about environment, but not social. And people tell me it's the S in the ESG that's really critical, workforce and so on. I'm going to say, can I have a 10-second final takeaway? One key skill is what I'm going to, one key competency that you would say to educators, please, that they could take away.
Okay, well, I'll start. And I think there's a synthesis skill. That's what I think. And I'm looking sort of 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So people who are in secondary school right now, I mean, we didn't talk about S&G, but trust me, they're bombs in this that people just have not got to grips with at all. E was big enough on its own. But there's so many different languages that need to, and so much raw data in completely different forms that has to be synthesized. And I think that's a skill set that accountants are going to have to learn.
Okay.
I might add that I think it's more of a value than a competency, but it's around trying to generate this enterprising spirit. It's about this curiosity, because what we have to be mindful of is what we know today and what we have to learn to deal with today on CSRD or in any sustainability reporting. The only thing we know is there's more coming, there's more. So you need to create resilience, curiosity, and trying to drive impact. And if people are thinking like that as they come into this area, I think they'll learn the technicalities of it. But actually, they have to want, because this is quite challenging, so they have to want to do it and be in it and want to learn and actually drive impact for their organisation.
I'd echo that and just add collaboration. The collaborative skill, really critical.
Brilliant.
My last, it's loads of challenges here. I think there's huge opportunities
Yes.
to really rebrand accountancy. And I think that's one thing I've picked up from the panel. How do we make those kids really want to be accountants? And it's not that you be, you're good at maths, you be an accountant. It's, are you creative? And I would like putting creative with accountancy. Are you, are you innovative? Are you a good communicator? We've talked a lot about dialogues, conversations. But and that's a challenge that, for us as educators, I see a lot of academics in the audience there. So that's a lot of change and a lot of moving outside the comfort zone. My tip would be, it takes a village. I was told that when I was having twins 15 years ago, and ask for help. So if you don't reach out and ask for help, I've not known a better community, a better network of supportive, I suppose, friends as such, in terms of wanting to share knowledge, share expertise, and drive that future. So I would ask for help would be my top tip.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Have you one word, Glenn?
One word, I'd probably just say our ethical values as accountants need to reflect sustainability in there. So that should be where it all starts from, is that's an accountant means a sustainable accountant.
Super. I think that's a brilliant place to stop our broader societal role and public interest. So can I just say, I think we've had a really insightful discussion and hopefully thought-provoking and maybe frightening and inspiring at the same time. But thank you very much to all our panellists. Thank you very much.
Thank you.